This politician got an abortion and then has actively tried to make sure that you can't get one. Today, we're talking about Cammack, the Dismemberment Act, and these pick-me women who are obsessed with serving the patriarchy and making sure that the rules that you have to follow don't apply to them when it's convenient. I've said it once, I'll say it again. Abortion bans do not stop abortions. Legislators and politicians and their mistresses and their daughters are always going to have access to abortions. Just like this politician from Florida who needed an abortion and got one. Let's paint a picture because this really shows the reality and the cruelty of these bans. It's May 31st, 2024. A woman is in a Florida emergency room. She has severe abdominal pain. Doctors run tests and they find out that she has a coronal ectopic pregnancy, which means the embryo has implanted where the fallopian tube meets the uterus. All that to say is there's no heartbeat and there's no path to viability here. Ectopic pregnancies are incredibly dangerous for the mother and they are not viable pregnancies. Yet so many women get turned away or say come back when you're closer to dying, then get treatment because of these very cruel bans across the United States of America. So the doctors basically look at this woman and say, if this ruptures, it's going to kill you because that's what happens. But do they act? No. They're scared. The treatment is a drug called Methotrexate, and it essentially blocks the embryo from developing. It terminates the pregnancy, and it will save this woman's life. The doctors know this. They know exactly what to do. She knows this. Everyone in the room understands what needs to be done, the only option here. But the doctors don't do it because Florida's 6-week abortion ban went into effect 30 days ago. And these doctors who have trained for years and know exactly what this woman needs are standing in that room too scared to do what their Hippocratic oath has sworn them to do. Scared of going to prison, scared of losing their medical licenses, scared that giving this woman the medical help that she needs or she might die or her fallopian tube might burst or whatever, scared that the help that they are supposed to provide will cross some sort of new legal line that nobody has really clearly defined for them. And essentially the law is so vague that it seems to be the best thing to do, the safest thing to do for the doctors, at least, not for the woman, is to wait, see how bad it gets, and make sure it's bad enough that they can say like, hey, she was going to die without this. This woman is obviously not okay with this plan because she's like, I might die. She argues with them. She reads through the law on her phone and is like, this can't apply to me in this situation. She even calls Governor Ron DeSantis, but she can't get through. Finally, hours later, after this poor woman has been in excruciating pain, the doctors give her the medication and she survives. This is a story going on across the United States of America to so many women who don't have the power to get the intervention and the help they need before it's too late, leaving them to lose organs and be in critical condition and pain unnecessarily, spending weeks in the ICU recovering from what could have been totally avoidable, or not surviving this at all. This story in particular is about a Florida politician named Cammack. She is a Republican congresswoman from Florida's 3rd District. She is a co-chair of the House pro-life caucus. She has voted for anti-abortion legislation repeatedly throughout her time in Congress. And semi-recently, she's introduced this bill called the Dismemberment Abortion Ban Act, which would act as somewhat of a federal ban on abortion. I'll get into the details later because it's not an outright ban, but it's like pretty close. After she survived this emergency situation, almost dying because of the fear that her own political work to help create, she said that the doctors hesitating were fear-mongering at its worst, caused by the left, not by the anti-abortion bans that have everyone scared, but by the left's panic about these bans. And she claims that what she went through wasn't an abortion. And then she introduced more abortion restrictions. So that's what we're talking about today. And some of the harmful legislation she's introducing and the hypocrisy of it all. Welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here along with the fall of the patriarchy. And we don't have time for pick-me's. And today we are talking about the pick-me of pick-me's seemingly when it comes to all things anti-abortion. I'm your host, CC Binx, your favorite feminist with a TikTok addiction. today I'm doing something I don't normally do on this podcast, and I'm really honing in on one person and their legislative record and just going to town here with all of this hypocrisy. I feel like I normally talk about more vague concepts, or not vague concepts, but like more broad things, or try to have more of a discussion. But I heard about this story years ago when it happened and was appalled at the hypocrisy and how it wasn't a headline everywhere, because her needing to terminate her pregnancy is exactly what so many women need. And that's like the part of this pro-life conversation that isn't had, is that a lot of people who need abortion care don't want abortions. Of course, a lot of people who access abortion want abortions, and that's fine too. But there are so many women who need this medical care, like life-saving care, who aren't able to get it. And it's inhumane. And what happened to her was inhumane. And then she goes and is like, no, that wasn't an abortion, and none of you guys should be able to terminate your pregnancies, even though I was able to. She was so scared, she called the governor, who didn't answer. Shocking, Ron DeSantis. There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And I think that is really why I want to shine a light on this, because I've just been so appalled by her behavior. And now I've seen she's introduced even more harmful legislation than she's already been a part of when it comes to being anti-abortion, even though she got one. So let's spend this hour talking about her and calling this BITCH out, because girl, what are you doing? How are women across the United States literally dying in emergency rooms because of this ban? And this law is applying to everyone. But if you have power and connections and whatever, you're fine. It's not American and it's not okay. So who is this woman? Because I feel like this emergency room story I just told you hits so much harder when you understand her reputation and her work as a congresswoman. She is a 37-year-old Republican congresswoman, and she is pretty much one of the country's leader on anti-abortion policies, especially one of Florida's leaders on anti-abortion policies. If you don't know, Florida has one of the most restrictive bans in the country. She is the co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus, one of the most explicit anti-abortion caucuses in Congress. So like, this is her lane. This is her brand. This is what she's about. This is what she's built her political identity on, is being adamantly anti-choice. And tells us she needed to make that choice. In January 2025, she voted for H.R. 21, the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act, which was a bill that passed in the House, which mandates medical care for infants born alive after abortion attempts. Which, like, I don't even really think that's a thing, but that includes criminal penalties for healthcare providers who fail to comply. All that to say is she is pro-penalizing doctors who help women get abortions, which is interesting and feels very hypocritical considering she terminated her pregnancy with the help of doctors. And she would have, if they didn't intervene and help her. It's crazy to me that most people can't see the nuance when they vote on these things or when they support these things, but especially if you've had to receive this medical care. So delusional and weird. What I really want to focus on is the Dismemberment Abortion Ban Act, which Cammack introduced. This bill targets a procedure called dilation and evacuation, which is known as a D&E. It's the standard method used for abortions that are far enough along where taking the abortion pill wouldn't work. And sometimes when you take the pill, you need to still do this because not everything comes out of you. Women who have miscarriages need D&Es often, because sometimes not everything comes out and they need to get it out or they're going to get sepsis and death. Women who find out their babies have genetic conditions, that means that they're not going to survive, need D&Es to get those babies out of them. And like, a lot of these situations where D&Es are being used are very tragic. Like, if you're having an abortion in the second trimester, that's not legal in a lot of places. And so if you're doing that, it's often because things are dire and that's not the choice you want to make. And that's probably a baby you were excited to keep. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is the main professional organization for OBGYNs in this country, they consider a D&E the safest method for second trimester termination. It's also used a lot in cases of fetal anomaly. Basically, you discover at your 20-week scan that something is wrong and the baby won't survive outside of the womb, which imagine how heartbreaking that is, being pregnant for 20 weeks and finding that happened to someone I know, a friend of mine, and it was just like horrible. And it's like, imagine she couldn't get that care. She would just have to stay pregnant and give birth to a baby that was gonna arrive in this world not alive. Like, how cruel is that? People coming up to her and saying, congratulations, when she's like, there's a dead baby inside me, but I'm not allowed to get it removed. Like, it's just sick and twisted. It's just sick and twisted when you actually think about what these things mean for real Americans and for real people. But it's also used in cases of fetal demise or in emergency situations. It's not a niche procedure. It is a core part of OB care. And Congresswoman Cammack, who again has terminated a pregnancy that she probably wanted to keep, so should understand how hard that is calling it sadistic and gruesome. Even calling it dismemberment in the bill, like putting dismemberment in the bill, is just so inhumane, and shows how much she's really trying to villainize this very crucial medical procedure. Her bill would punish doctors who perform this with fines or up to 2 years in federal prison. It's just cruel. If you want to know if it's cruel or not, look at the name of the bill. It's not a neutral name. Dismemberment abortion is not a thing. It's never going to appear in medical literature anywhere because it's not a medical thing. It's a term coined by anti-abortion activists and organizations to specifically make a standard healthcare procedure seem more horrifying than it is. Like, is there anything grosser than needing your own emergency, reason to terminate a pregnancy and then trying to criminalize doctors for doing that to other women, which is just cruel. And again, if this bill would pass, it would also target women who have had miscarriages, because a lot of women who have miscarriages need the D&E. What I find interesting is that Congresswoman Cammack is very adamant that she did not receive abortion care. And technically, that's not wrong, but technically it is also a very stupid stance to take when you've terminated a pregnancy. So basically, Florida's 6-week abortion ban, called the Heartbeat Protection Act, which, ask a doctor, they normally don't give you an ultrasound at 6 weeks because they don't think they'll be able to detect a heartbeat. Oh, also, the baby inside of you is not even called a fetus until 10 or 11 weeks. It's an embryo up until then, just so we're all clear on what the real terms are here. Okay, so basically, after Florida's abortion ban went into effect, the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration immediately was like, hey, give us some guidance, clarify what you mean here, because abortion is a medical treatment that many women need. It's not always a want. Oftentimes it's a need. For example, what's the treatment if it's an ectopic pregnancy, which is not classified under the abortion law, which is important to point out because this law was so unclear that the medical professionals needed clarification the day after it was passed. That's how much the people are passing these laws don't understand what they're talking about. Don't understand the nuance or the severity of these situations. But again, because this language was vague, a month later, when Florida Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack goes into the emergency room, finding out she has an ectopic pregnancy, doctors don't want to help her. Well, maybe I shouldn't say they don't want to. They decide not to help her because they don't know if they're going to get criminally prosecuted, lose their medical license, go to prison. So they wait until things are so extreme that they have to act, which is what doctors, again, are doing across America. And she doesn't understand how common her situation is and goes to say these doctors were doing this because of the left, and then goes to continue to be so anti-abortion as she's always been after this experience. It just feels extra cruel and inhumane. Not that I understand, but I can get how someone who doesn't understand the nuance and the real medical reasons for abortions when they do this. Also, I believe that half the men in Congress and these extremist Republicans pushing these anti-abortion legislations, they just don't care about women and they're cruel. I think that tracks here, given under his eye kind of vibes with them. But if you're a woman who's experienced this and you still feel that way, it is literally insane to me. What is wrong with her? What is wrong with her? And what is wrong with her district that they keep electing her? I lived in Florida for a bit, so I get that there's a lot of conservatives there, but there's also a lot of not. I don't know her district. I'm not very familiar with her district or whatever, but so weird. Such weird behavior. I I really, really hate to see how much hypocrisy there is with the Republican Party. I mean, both parties can be hypocritical, of course. Every human can be hypocritical, but they are just so blatantly hypocritical. What is the word? I'm really struggling with this. They really put out these rules and then don't expect them to apply to them. You see it time and time again. But instead of actually reflecting and realizing how harmful anti-abortion legislation is, after Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack received medical intervention to terminate her pregnancy, she says the reason she didn't get help sooner was fear-mongering from the left. The doctors who hesitated to treat her were doing exactly what doctors all over Florida, Texas, Georgia, and every other state with these restrictive bans have been doing since these laws went into effect. They wait, they calculate the risk, and they make sure the situation is clearly within the exception before they act. Because these bans and these laws are so vague, and because the consequences are so extreme, career ending, prison time, that is not fear-mongering, especially not from the left. This is happening across America, and it's because these bans are harmful. That's why maternal and infant mortality rates are rising in states that have these bans. I shouldn't even say are rising, have risen in states with these bans exponentially. So all that to say, pro-life is a lie. You do not care if women and infants die, because if you did, you would care about the research showing how harmful these bans are to women and their babies. These doctors were not confused by the liberal media. They were confused by the harmfulness and the vagueness of these Republican-led anti-abortion bills. It's the same way that doctors responded to Amber Nicole Thurman when she needed a D&C. They hesitated and she died. The fear is real, and it's killed women, and it almost killed Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack. Yet here she is thinking she deserves healthcare that you guys don't, that we guys don't, actually, that all of us don't. Kat Cammack almost died because her doctors were afraid to terminate her life-threatening pregnancy, because they were afraid of going to jail, losing their medical licenses, whatever, so on and so forth. And her response was to go on television and to say the fear that those doctors had and their hesitation came and was manufactured from the political left by her political opponents, if you will. That's definitely a choice of hers to make. And it is a choice that every woman who walks into a Florida emergency room without a law degree and without the governor's phone number is going to have to deal with. And now she's pushing one of the most restrictive nationwide anti-abortion bills we've ever seen. And I think what is really important to understand here is that women have died since the fall of Roe because they were in similar situations as this Republican Congresswoman. They were in emergency situations. And the way that she was able to be helped, these women weren't so lucky because they didn't have this privilege. They weren't able to just pull up the bill that they knew because they helped sponsor that was harming them and say, hey, no, here's what I think this legal language means. Who's going to do that? What regular civilian is going to do that when they are in an emergency situation? And for multiple women, their situations were not really covered by the law, or it was vague enough that doctors didn't act and they died. And again, they're not hesitating because they don't know what to do medically to help these women. They're hesitating because of these abortion bans and how it could harm their career and their lives. They fear they could go to jail. And that's one of the things that's really detrimental about these abortion bills, is that there are like these vague exceptions, but also not really. But there are criminal penalties for doctors who get these exceptions wrong. So like how much, like at what point is it life-threatening? So many women, they say, go out of the emergency room and just wait there until it gets worse because you're not bad enough for me to help yet. That's insane. Imagine that was happening to your wife or your sister or yourself. And it would be one thing if it was hypothetically harmful to women, but the fact that it's already killed several women across the US, how many women have to die before people understand what this is about? And this is what's wrong with politicians in the US. Like, they make these rules that they want you to follow and they don't follow themselves. They get theirs, they're all good, and they let their constituents suffer. That's horrible. In reproductive politics specifically, I feel like it is a tale as old as time, where, again, banning abortion is not going to stop these congresswomen from getting abortions when they need them, or helping their daughters get abortions, or especially their underage daughters, you know, who aren't married, and that's a bad look. Or these congressmen and these politicians are going to help their mistresses that they impregnate when they're cheating on their wives get abortions. That's all going to be good. Rich women are going to get abortions. It's just the everyday American who is going to be harmed by these bans. And that's why it's not pro-life, it's anti-choice. Because here's the thing abortion bans have never successfully done. They have never eliminated access to abortion for people with connections or money or status or power. What they do is eliminate safe, legal, affordable, accessible abortion options for people who do not have those things. Women with resources have always been able to travel to get the care they need. So yeah, abortion bans don't stop abortions. We know that. And most people don't have the help, the privilege, and the status of Republican Congresswoman Cammack to get the same care that she got for her ectopic pregnancy. A woman in rural Florida who does not know that ectopic pregnancy treatment is theoretically not a part of Florida's very restrictive abortion ban, who cannot read the law on her phone and argue its interpretation and call Governor Ron DeSantis, that woman is at the mercy of whatever the doctors in the room are willing to do, how much they're willing to risk. And sometimes doctors hesitating is going to kill you. It's just so frustrating for me to see women like this just upholding the patriarchy and enforcing these restrictions that ultimately they don't apply to themselves. Women who gain access to power by working within patriarchal structures become very effective enforcers of those structures. They don't understand how conditional the patriarchy is and instead see the way it's protected them from what is ultimately the thing that will harm them, the patriarchy. Congresswoman Cammack is not the first woman to uphold a system that almost killed her and then turn around and blame the very people who warned her that it would and also tried to protect her and everyone else from the system's ability to do that kind of harm. But it's important to remember that the patriarchy does not give out like protection passes for being loyal. It might give you some temporary access and power, but the terms of that can be changed at any time. So how real is your power if it's illusionary? And it's hard for me to imagine, like, what does a woman like this get out of it? What do they get out of harming other women in a way that almost killed them? And they understand the severity of that, and then they just like can't connect to that. Like, what is that other than like maybe being a psychopath? I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but I think it really shines a light on what the patriarchy as a political system offers women who are willing to enforce its values, the power and the access that they feel, and they feel so loyal to that. And maybe like that seat at the table that they don't feel like is being offered to other women. And of course, the patriarchy and conservative movements love when a woman is the one pushing messages that are anti-women, such as these restrictive abortion bans, because that makes it more palpable. That discredits other women when we say, hey, this is going to harm women. Then they're like, well, then why is this woman the one leading the anti-abortion caucus? Why is this woman the one leading this anti-abortion procedure bill? Like, you know what I mean? It really helps delegitimize the real and important talking points about how this is going to harm everyday Americans and every woman living in this country. And again, I think it's very important to talk about the ways in which these bans are very harmful to women who want to have their own children. So I think a lot of women think, oh, well, this won't affect me because I would never get an abortion. Girl, you don't know that. I bet this congresswoman thought she would never get one too. And even if you are lucky enough to never be in that position, which I hope you are, what if you have a miscarriage and you need a D&E? They're coming for that, right? That's what they want to put on the chopping block next. What about the fact that these bans make it riskier to give birth in this country? At the end of the day, these bans control women's bodies. And this episode, we've talked a lot about the like healthcare aspect of it, of women who need this care as a medical life-saving treatment. But it's also important to note that vertical of this aside, when women don't have the agencies over their own bodily autonomy and their ability to make choices for themselves without having the government involved in what they want to have happen with their uterus, which should be a conversation between them and their healthcare provider, they also lose out on so much more. They lose out on being able to excel economically. They lose out on being able to leave a partner who's harming them. Like, there's so much that goes on behind the curtain, and it's so much bigger than abortion or not abortion. It's literally is like a woman's right to choose life for herself. And if you guys are so worried about the unborn babies, maybe we should focus on men since men could get a woman pregnant every single day this week if they wanted to. Once a woman is pregnant, she's not getting pregnant again for 9 more months if she keeps that pregnancy. So if we really are going to control a gender when it comes to unwanted pregnancies, I think we're focusing on the wrong one. But as we wrap up, I want to remind you to please look into the Dismemberment Abortion Ban Act and what it targets, because targeting D&E procedures is actually so cruel. Like, please don't just read these Fox News headlines. I mean, obviously, if you're watching this podcast, that's probably not your cup of tea, but like, look into what this bill is actually saying, because it's actually so cruel and weird, so inhumane. Again, especially when we know how often D&Es are used in fetal anomaly cases and medical emergencies after miscarriages. Banning D&E is not a political position. It's a restriction on the real care that real women need. And please know what it is so you can name it accurately when we talk about it. I do feel like they push these specific bills targeting certain parts of abortion access so that A, they can chip away at overall access, but B, they hope that you don't know what a D&E is, because unfortunately, most people won't until they need one. And also what I want to leave us with is it's really important for us to understand that exceptions in abortion bans are not the same as access. An exception on paper and an exception in practice are two completely different things. And Cammack's experience demonstrates this perfectly. She was in a situation that the law theoretically covered, but was denied access to life-saving medical care for hours because doctors were scared to terminate her pregnancy, even though it needed to happen to save her life. And as always, please support organizations that are doing the boots on the ground work. Most of them fund abortions directly. So support your local abortion fund and your local abortion activists who are making sure that women who need this help can access it. And if you don't know where to start, look up the National Network of Abortion Funds. And there are local abortion funds in your state. They're in every state. And these organizations are so important because they are doing the work that make this essential healthcare accessible. And also get ready and get excited to vote. There are primaries leading up to the midterms that are happening this November. We have some time, but be very prepared to vote in November, because let's not have politicians that are so hypocritical like this one able to stay in office. Their job should be on the line if they don't practice what they preach. We know that most Americans don't support these incredibly restrictive abortion bans. Even people who aren't pro-abortion in America don't support these very restrictive abortion bans. It's not commonly popular. So let's make sure that these extremist politicians who are pushing them through don't get to stay in office. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining this episode. Let me know what you learned. Had you heard of this before? Because I heard about it a few years ago and I've been wanting to talk about it. I normally talk about more like very specific things on my TikTok because I think it's just easier to like talk about in a shorter video, where sometimes talking about like one specific thing in a longer form video can be hard because it's like, I don't know, I want to just like have interesting stuff to say for 30 minutes. That's not always easy, even though I am a yapper. So yeah, for the longest time, I've been like, I need to make a TikTok about it. I need to make a TikTok about it. And then I saw this dismemberment bill and I was just like enraged and was like, I need to make a whole episode on this, because why don't I see people talking about this more and more outraged? It's disgusting. And shame on you, Cammack, like shame on you. There's a special place in hell for women who act the way you do. I'll just say that. But wishing everyone the best, trying to leave on a positive note. And yeah, let me know what you learned and let me know what you want me to talk about next. I love seeing comments that you guys leave about what kind of topics you're interested in. So yeah, let me know. Anyways, thanks for joining and I'll see you soon. Bye.